fam, Alexxa Rains here with another reaction. So today we're going to be continuing with our lifetime intimate portraits of our Golden Girls, and this time I'm going to be watching Blanche, so Rue McClanahan's intimate portrait from 2000. I'm super excited to learn more about her, and in honor of watching that, I am going to be drinking my tea from my Golden Girls cup. I don't know if you guys can see it very well, but it has all of our girls, and then it says "Stay Golden" in the back. So in honor of our girls, I'm going to be sipping tea while getting tea from Rue. I hope you guys are excited too. And as always, if you're looking for the full length reaction to any of my other content, you can find that on Patreon, and the link will be in the description below. And if you cannot support us on Patreon, that's completely fine. You can always support us on YouTube by liking this video, commenting, subscribing, and joining our membership program. So without further ado, let's get into our episode, or our portrait.
Born a simple girl from the plains of Oklahoma, Rue McClanahan has led anything but a simple life. From an early age, she was destined to perform and influence people's lives with love and laughter.
Yes, she is.
She was born an actress from the first breath she ever drew.
Even through her many marriages and romances, she has continued to look on the bright side of life.
Many.
I just popped up out of nowhere and said to him, "I'd like to marry you." And he looked very surprised.
Rue's love life has always been very important to her, and consequently it's a source of great entertainment for her friends.
But she loves playing the bride.
For over 30 years on television, she has proven that sexy is not an age, but a state of mind.
Yes, girl.
I didn't realize that it was giving some women across America the freedom that they had felt they hadn't had up until then.
She has had to fight life-threatening illnesses.
Couldn't breathe. I couldn't get my breath. I couldn't get enough breath. They thought I was hysterical. 3 days went by, and finally they rushed me into ICU.
Jeez.
But through it all, she has not allowed it to diminish her, but only to increase her passion and zest for life.
Rue embraces life. She embraces risk. She embraces happiness.
I'm John Ritter, and this is an intimate portrait of my friend, Golden Girl Rue McClanahan.
Oh, John Ritter. I love John Ritter. Rest in peace.
Rue McClanahan's glamour and vitality have inspired women of all ages to celebrate their femininity and individuality. Her work in television, film, and the theater have proven that being a woman today can be truly golden.
40. Suddenly 40 is young.
Oh, aren't you sweet?
I love her.
All I really wanted to do when I started out was to be a good influence, to make a difference.
I adore her. I simply adore her. She's so giving, and she's so courageous.
Rue is an amazingly talented woman, a really first-rate actress, and a delicious comedian.
She's like nobody else I know. She's not a rubber stamp of anybody. She's her own person.
She's the funniest lady in the world. So unusual, so talented in every way that she's an embarrassment.
Eddie Rue McClanahan was born in Helton, Oklahoma, a small town outside of Tulsa where life was simple and everybody knew your name. And to this day, Rue's hometown friends still know her by her given name, Eddie Rue, even though she shortened it long ago when she entered into show business. Rue was the firstborn of 2 daughters for Bill and Rue McClanahan, and from an early age she was always encouraged to dream big. Her parents showed her by example that anything was possible.
That's amazing.
They both worked. They were both business people back in a time where it was unusual for women to work.
That's what they look
and I
like.
think that sort of set the environment, set the stage for Rue and me, because that was the norm to us.
Her father, Bill, was a general contractor, and her mother, Runell, owned a beauty shop in town. As busy as they both were, Bill and Runell always found time for their family.
They were loving parents. Bill and Runell both worshiped the ground that Eddie Rue walked on.
And sometimes that ground was shaky.
She was about 2.5, and we had the preacher over for Sunday dinner. And the preacher's name was Brother Duck. She looked at him a long time, and you could see the bells ringing Duck, you know. She got a spoonful of mashed potatoes, and she threw it right at his face and hollered, "Duck!"
When Rue was a toddler, the economy was in a state of depression, and her father, Bill, had to move the family to another town in Oklahoma in order to find work.
Mother and Bill moved us to Durant when he was off during the Second World War. Durant was and still is a charming, sleepy, quiet little Oklahoma town of maybe 15,000.
Even though Rue lived in a small town, her mother was committed to teaching her about the performing arts by bringing her to dance class.
She was born an actress from the first breath she ever drew.
I remember Mother having to kind of really convinced me this was a good idea. And I reluctantly went to class. Well, I fell in love with it. I was a natural. I was a natural dancer.
When Rue was 5 years old, life as an only child ended. Her sister Melinda was born.
I never looked at Melinda as a baby so much as my pal. I was 5 years ahead of her and taught her everything.
She was a friend, even though she was, my big sister. She was a friend.
When Rue reached the 7th grade, the McClanahan's moved again, this time to Ardmore, Oklahoma. But Rue didn't take to this uprooting easily.
It's true that Ardmore and Durant are only 60 miles apart, though to me at that time, it might as well have been China. It was across the world as far as I was concerned.
She was a new girl in school, which I'm sure wasn't easy because most of us had known each other for years.
We lived out in the country, so I couldn't mix and mingle with the kids the way I had in Durant. I was isolated, and it took me half a year to make friends, and the way I did it was I had a birthday. Aww. I invited all of the gang in the 9th grade that I wanted to be a part of to come to my birthday party, hoping a few might accept. They all accepted.
Rue soon became one of the most popular students in school, and she was also running her own business. Her dance instructor decided to move out of town and asked her if she would take over his studio.
I became his partner, and I took over the dancing school, and he and I were equal partners. And then the next year, it was all mine. My final year in high school, I ran the dancing academy by myself.
Rue and I danced quite a bit for programs, like garden clubs or something. They would need some type of entertainment, and boy, off we would go.
I remember Melinda and I had a tap dance that was set to Orchids in the Moonlight. And we also did Me and My Shadow. We did each of them several times.
Rue's parents encouraged her to pursue her dreams of being a performer as long as her grades in school didn't suffer.
From the very beginning of my schooling, I was expected to be a top student. And I expected it of myself. And my father had been. He was valedictorian of his class. Mother was valedictorian of her class. It came easily to me.
They raised Rue and me with a great deal of independence, and we never had the feeling at all that there was anything that we couldn't do or shouldn't do because we were girls.
I was voted most likely to succeed because I did so much. I had my own business. I had my own car. That was pretty unusual in that little town in those days.
We knew that she would succeed as an entertainer. This became obvious to us. She always remained focused, gave her total attention to whatever she was doing.
I was, for a long, long time, a straight A student. When I started teaching dance, however, my grades slipped a little.
One time she did get a F. She flunked a class. She was taking typing, and she decided to drop it because she wanted to be in a play, and she couldn't do both.
Rue enrolled in the University of Tulsa, where she majored in German and theater arts. She excelled so much in both majors that in her senior year, she was offered 2 full scholarships.
Oh, wow.
I graduated cum laude, and I got to be what's it called, a BWOC, a big woman on campus.
After graduating from college, Rue decided to try to become a professional actress, so she moved to New York City.
One of my friends going to New York City to work and to pursue her career in acting. That just was mind-boggling almost.
Rue was headed for the bright lights of Broadway, but love seemed to dim her dreams.
Aww.
It was the late 50s, and Rue was living in New York City, striving to become a Broadway actress. Her small-town values were no match for the big city.
There was one thing that my parents didn't quite prepare me for, and that was that life out there in the real world can be very rough, and that there can be people out there you can't trust, and you have to be on your guard. I was not on my guard, and I didn't expect the roughness. So when I moved to New York, I was in tears a lot of the time.
She was hired for her first professional acting job soon after she landed in New York. However, the job was in Pennsylvania.
Went to the Erie Playhouse. Right after a few months here in New York, I got a job as the ingenue of all things. And there I met my first husband. And I trusted him to be the fine fellow he seemed to be. In fact, my mother came up and visited, and she said, now, if you get involved with anybody, that's the fellow I want you to get involved with.
Rue fell in love with fellow actor Tom Bish, and within a year of their first meeting, they were wed. But marriage seemed to finish the romance.
Oh, wow.
He very shortly, not exactly tired of our marriage, but he panicked. He panicked. He couldn't face the responsibility anymore, which was, to me, unthinkable. I'd never known this with anybody. I couldn't explain it.
As the months passed, Rue's marriage continued to fall apart. To make matters worse, she found out that she was pregnant.
So I went through the last 4 months of the pregnancy in great trauma, misery, because I was afraid. He kept saying, just don't talk to me about it until the baby comes, then we'll see. And so I went back to Ardmore for the last month of my pregnancy and had the baby there. And while I was at the hospital, I called Tom and said, the baby's on its way.
Mark was born in a hospital there in Ardmore. And I was there and went up to see them, and she was very despondent.
I couldn't stop crying. I kind of went to pieces. I cried for 36 hours, and I was exhausting myself. And of course, it wasn't good for the baby either. And so the doctor called Tom and told him that if he wanted to contribute to our health and possibly lives, he'd better get up here to the hospital and convince me that he loved me. He came running into the hospital and did a very good performance. He was a good actor. Threw himself across my bed and said, I've been so silly, how could I have been so stupid, I love you, and I thought everything was fine, like in the movies. I thought, oh, good, the happy ending. But the next morning, he left, and I didn't see him anymore after that.
After a quick divorce, Rue now had to face life as a single mother.
The one thing I knew that I couldn't do was go back to New York City with this infant. I knew I couldn't do that. And I didn't quite know how I was going to handle this. So I decided to stay in Ardmore and open another dance, and this time an acting school.
She has the ability to she can stiff up her lip anything, for one thing. And I think probably she is selfish enough to know that you can't go on weeping.
I knew I couldn't stand living in Ardmore too much longer. I was living with my parents, and I had a new baby, and they had their ways of bringing him up. I had my ideas of how to bring him up.
Rue was still upset by her divorce and took solace in one of her best friends, Norman Hartwig. He became a great source of comfort for her, so Rue decided to move closer to Norman.
Mother said to me, well, now, if you're going to be living in the same city as Norman, I want you to get married. Well, remember, this was 1959, and I thought, oh, yes, Mother. So, but Norman wanted to marry me, and I was considering marrying him. She needed to marry Norman I think as a validation, of her worth, because she really felt trashed.
In 1959, soon after her divorce became final, Norman and Rue married, and for the first time in a long time, she felt secure.
They supported each other, and I think they both cared about each other. They were very good friends, and I think they thought it would build and be more than that.
Norman and I just came to realize that we really weren't in love. It had been a wonderful friendship. He was, I guess, my best friend, but it wasn't a marriage.
After a few years of marriage, Rue divorced Norman, ending her second marriage. It was back to the theater and back to New York City, only this time with her son in tow.
Then I thought it would be a good idea if we went off, struck out on our own in New York.
She'd run home and cook dinner, and say, okay, see ya. Take care of yourself, I'll be back, and she'd go off to do the play. Or sometimes I'd go with her, and watch the play until I had seen it so many times that I memorized it.
It was 1964, and Rue was determined to find work in the theater. Her tenacity finally paid off when she landed a role in her biggest production yet, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
It took me 4 auditions to get into that show. In the show also was a young man dancer named Peter DeMeo. Now, Peter was waiting to hear whether some playhouse was going to hire him to do Galileo. I thought, oh, please, God, let him get Galileo. Let him get Galileo. Let him go do Galileo, because I sensed that Peter DeMeo was going to get me if he didn't get out of town. I just felt that I was somehow in his thrall. I couldn't escape this man. Sure enough, he didn't get that Galileo. We were in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty together for 4 weeks of rehearsal and 11 weeks of playing.
Life was going well for Rue. She was working as an actress, and she met a man who she was crazy about, but her hectic schedule left little time for her 7-year-old son, Mark. Finally, succumbing to pressure from her mother, Rue sent Mark to live with her in Oklahoma.
I spent many a tearful day and night when he was in Oklahoma.
It hurt a lot of times because, there was certainly a lot of love for both my grandparents and my mother, and I didn't want to let either of them down.
The only time I was really afraid of losing Mark was when he was in the 1st grade in Ardmore, and I was in New York. I was making $55 a week. After that, it was unemployment insurance. And I got a letter from my sister saying, if you don't come and get Mark, Sheridan and I are going to start adoption procedures and see if we can adopt him. I said, look, if it'd be better for Mark, then, I'll bring him into my family, at least for a while, until you can get to the point where you can take him back. And I thought, oh my Lord, can that happen? I've got to get him with me. I've got to get him with me.
I felt for Rue because I knew what she wanted and wanted it so badly. And it was so hard to come by.
I always wanted the family, and I always wanted the acting career. I wanted them equally.
I love her.
One was as important as the other.
It was the late 60s, and Rue was working steadily in off-Broadway productions, but she didn't feel complete. She wanted to marry Peter DeMeo and bring Mark back from Oklahoma to live with them.
She thought that she needed a husband, for a father for the child, which I think is correct. You do. I just, she made a hasty choice, I guess.
Rue married Peter, but the marriage was unsteady from the start, and the thought of divorcing once again was not an option for Rue.
I'd been divorced twice already. I was determined not to get divorced again. No matter what it took, I was going to make this marriage work. Well, I didn't have whatever it took.
Maybe Rue didn't have what it took, but she spent years trying.
She struggled valiantly to to keep that relationship, to keep that structure, so that she would feel that Mark had a home and could live with her and, be a real family, so to speak, even though it was a dysfunctional relationship.
I felt at the time it would have been much better off if he was out of the picture. It was definitely a lot of pain during that period. That was very, very traumatic.
And that's about the time I decided I had to get out of this.
After 7 years of marriage to Peter, Rue finally filed for divorce, ending her third marriage.
When I was growing up, I pictured being happily married. I always expected to be happily married once and forever. That's what I thought would happen.
Rue was dejected by yet another failed marriage, but she found acting helped ease her pain.
Aww.
She was cast as a lead in a Broadway show, Jimmy Shine, playing opposite Dustin Hoffman. While on Broadway, she was also cast as a villainess in a popular daytime television serial.
Another World was a landmark for me because it was a soap opera. And for the first time, my mother stopped saying, "Why don't you come back to Ardmore and open a dancing school?" Because now she could turn it on and see me several times a week. Now it's real to her. It's legitimate. I'm an actress.
Next, as Rue's Broadway career takes off, Hollywood discovers her.
Yay!
It was the early 70s, and although Rue was a daytime television star, it was a small play called Who's Happy Now? That she appeared in 3 years earlier that prompted television producer Norman Lear to offer her a guest spot on his sitcom All in the Family. Norman was so impressed with Rue's comedic ability that he cast her in her new TV show called Maude.
I had never heard of Rue McClanahan, which is an odd name to begin with. But I was doing the series Maude, and Norman Lear told me that he was bringing in Rue McClanahan to play my next-door neighbor, my best friend.
If you were going to cast a friend, anybody in the country were going to cast a friend for B. Arthur, and they came across Rue McClanahan, it seems like such a simple, easy decision.
Vivian became this sort of innocent, wide-eyed, oversexed, little doctor's wife.
I mean, it was just such fun working with her. We really ended up like, Lucy and Ethel Mertz of the 70s.
Given Maude's personality and strength and voice and so forth, Rue's voice, Rue's ability to do that ditzy kind of person, all of that fits so well.
I learned a lot from B. Arthur about how to do sitcom because I'd never done sitcom before. And I remember thinking those first few shows, I was so nervous, and I kept thinking, this bears a slight resemblance to acting.
Vivian, darling.
Rue not only became a part of a hit television show, she was also a part in changing TV's landscape by pushing the boundaries of censorship to new limits.
When the doorbell rings, I think it's my husband Arthur at the door.
Just a minute, Arthur. Hello, lover boy.
And there she was, completely nude, but wrapped in saran wrap.
She's hidden from the camera by Maude and Walter's bodies, and the camera is behind Maude and Walter. And we cut from the back of them to Vivian's face.
And the audience, of course, is just roaring. And then
I love her.
Viv shifts her weight just a little. And of course, they laugh harder.
Was Vivian wearing saran wrap under that?
It may be the longest laugh in television history.
Working on Maude allowed Rue to finally think of herself as a success.
I was making a regular paycheck. I was feeling financially secure for the first time. Mark was happy, which always made me happy. I was living in beautiful surroundings. I was being noticed for the first time.
Rue was also noticed by a man named Gus Fisher. They both had a mutual friend in common.
Gus was about 6'2.5", and Greek, and brown-eyed, brown hair, big head of hair, and everybody liked Gus. Everybody liked him.
Rue had a great time dating Gus because of his gregarious personality.
I was at rehearsal one day, and Gus called me, and he said, "I've come to a decision." I said, "What?" He said, "We're either going to get married soon or we're going to break up." Oh, I said, "Really?" And it panicked me. I thought, ooh, then I guess we have to get married soon.
I mean, she planned the whole wedding, and they wore the Greek crowns, you know, attached with ribbons to each other and the whole thing. It was so lovely. I mean, she puts on a hell of a wedding.
And after we were married, he wanted to go into commercial real estate. So he asked me if it would be all right if he just stopped working for a better part of a year and would go to commercial school.
Gus became a commercial realtor and spent a lot of time with his clients, building his business.
He wanted me to always be present at these parties that he was invited to, which didn't interest me in the slightest. And then when it came to be a birthday I had, instead of taking me out to dinner or something, he owed somebody a dinner, and he invited me to go along. And I thought, that's not the way you treat your wife's birthday.
Once the glitter blew off, now there's a person there that she didn't really know, and as it turned out, really didn't like that much.
Rue decided to file for divorce, ending her fourth marriage after only 2.5 years.
My investment counselor came to me and said, "Rue, I'm so afraid for your pension plan." Why? Because he said, you know, under California law, Gus has a right to half of it, anything you've earned while you were married. Oh, I said, he's not that kind of person. Well, he was. He was. And he felt that it was perfectly ethical for him to take half of everything I'd earned.
Financially, she suffered for it.
I think what hurt the worst was when I said to Gus, "Gus, if you persist in this and you take everything, half of everything I've got, I'm not going to have enough to send Mark to music school." That was the hardest thing of all.
In 1978, Maude ended its run. Rue had become a sought-after television actress and was immediately offered a series to star in, but what seemed to be a surefire opportunity turned out to be anything but. In 1978, Rue was still recovering from a recent divorce, both emotionally and financially. She was able to save enough money to send her 19-year-old son Mark away to music school. Rue was now focused on moving her career forward after Maude. She was offered her own series from producer Norman Lear called Apple Pie. However, it only lasted 2 episodes. Then in 1983, Rue was offered a role in a sitcom called Mama's Family.
They changed the whole character of Aunt Fran after I'd signed the contract. I didn't quite know how to play her. I felt wasted.
Rue was not at all happy with her role, but that concern became secondary when she faced the battle for her life.
Oh no.
I was lying in my dressing room one day, not feeling awfully well, but not feeling awfully sick, waiting to go down and rehearse, when a sharp, unbelievably sharp stab hit me right under the right rib.
Rue was rushed to the hospital with a severe gallbladder attack, and what was to be a routine operation ended up with serious complications.
Jeez.
When I woke up, couldn't breathe. I couldn't get my breath. I couldn't get enough breath. They thought I was hysterical. They said, "Do you have a therapist we can call?" I said, "Believe me, I'm fine up here, but I just can't breathe."
Rue contracted adult respiratory distress syndrome, which is a disease of the lungs that can onset after major surgery.
Oh my God.
This disease has over a 60% mortality rate.
60%?
And there were complications in the operation, and all of a sudden, she was at death's door. And it was really scary, because I really thought at one point I was going to lose her.
Rue pulled through and spent months rehabilitating. By the time she went back to Mama's Family, the series was coming to an end. She was looking forward to using her free time to catch up with old friends from Oklahoma. One of those friends was her old high school sweetheart, Tom Keel, who was recently divorced.
And I called him in Dallas and I said, how in the world are you and what have you been up to over these last 30 years?
Rue flew to Dallas to meet with Tom and catch up on old times.
He just looked adorable, just full of the dickens. And he was divorced and he was loose, free.
They got reacquainted and renewed their high school friendship. And it wasn't too long before they came back to Ardmore and got married. It was one of those stories where everybody's supposed to live happily ever after. But they did realize that they weren't the little kids anymore.
We were married for a year when we decided that maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all.
She is the total romantic, the total romantic. But then comes the light of day and she thinks, holy God, what have I done here, you know? And that's the end. It's very quick and it's very clean. But she loves playing the bride.
Rue's love life has always been very important to her, and consequently it's a source of great entertainment for her friends.
I mean, more people fell in love with her than you can possibly imagine.
She had the outline for a book that she never finished, which was called My First 5 Husbands. And it's a wonderful insight into her sense of humor.
The funny thing is, every time I got married, I thought, this is it. This is it. This is it forever, I think.
With her fifth marriage now behind her, Rue was ready to get back to work. She was sent a script for a television show about 4 ladies who shared a condominium in Florida, and they were called the Golden Girls.
I just can't believe it. I'm getting married. What do you think about that?
I think it's a mistake.
To wear all that makeup.
I know it's fast, but I just don't know when I'll find another like him. He just, oh, girls, he makes me feel so good, so young, so happy.
Oh, Rose, did you hear that? So happy.
But what I thought was so wonderful about the whole Golden Girls was that, number one, we were all vital, feeling, sexy, well-groomed, beautifully made up and coiffed, and not just a bunch of old women, you know, with the breasts hanging down to here.
Our characters were like 4 points on a compass. Each one was so different from the other, and yet we all somehow meshed together.
Yes, they did.
Rue's character, Blanche Devereaux, was a saucy and sexy lady who didn't quite fit the stereotype of middle age.
Finally turned that corner? Have I finally become so jaded that I can no longer put the name with the face? Oh, listen to me. He was probably just lousy in bed.
Blanche was a very engaging character who broke the rules. She broke the rules.
Blanche was so self-confident. Well, at least outwardly.
Yes.
She thought so highly of herself. She thought she was so attractive and sexy and just unbeatable. And it kind of helped me to come out of to shed more of my shyness. Because it hit me one day, hey, you know, this woman Blanche looks just like me. And I can act just like her. And so maybe it's okay for me to feel that way too.
What she is someone who hears the tune of a different drummer. She's just not like anybody else. She does things that most people don't do. She doesn't do things that most people do.
Honey, slut is a little harsh. I mean, Blanche isn't that bad.
Oh, my God! I can barely walk.
Rue became one of the top television stars of the 80s and recognized wherever she went. She was inundated with the gratitude of women from all over the country for showing them that women over 50 can still be sexy.
Yes, ma'am.
I didn't realize that it was giving some women across America the freedom that they had felt they hadn't had up until then to dress in a certain way, maybe younger than they'd been dressing, and maybe to feel younger than they'd been feeling. Or in other words, to publicly feel the way they secretly felt inside.
In 1987, Rue was recognized by her peers for her work in Golden Girls with an Emmy for Best Actress in a Comedy Series.
Being nominated for an Emmy is a huge thrill. And winning, of course, is the creme de la creme. It's wonderful to win.
Golden Girls was a top-rated show for 7 years, and it finally ended when B. Arthur decided to leave.
So I thought, I really should feel guilty, shouldn't I? But then I thought, no, I shouldn't feel guilty. We've had 7 terrific years, and I want out.
Now, I want you to promise that you will not say anything. Do you promise? Do you promise? Are you sure?
But what's got me so sad? I just never had 2 better friends.
The producers decided to keep the show on the air with the 3 remaining Golden Girls and renamed the show Golden Palace.
It wasn't the same. It was like taking a leg off a table. You need all 4 of those legs. You can't do it with 3.
Golden Palace never found its audience and was canceled after a year. Rue turned her attention and passions to her charitable causes, especially animal rights.
Both Rue and I and Betty, and were very heavily involved in animal rights issues.
I feel very, very sympathetic, compassionate toward those critters who can't speak. They are, after all, our wards. They are our responsibility. We've taken the world away from them.
For years, Rue has championed the cause of saving animals' lives, but she would soon again find herself in a battle to save her own life.
Jeez.
In 1997,
gorgeous.
after more than 25 years on television, the chance to perform on stage lured Rue back to New York City. But it was what she found backstage that made her stay for good.
Lo and behold, I went out to get some coffee. As I was coming back, there stood a man in the other room talking to the producers and the director. A man in a blue blazer. Good-looking guy. Thought, who could that be?
Maura Wilson was a friend of the play's producer and was helping with the production.
So I sort of took the bull by the horns one day and I said, golly, I've got so many lines to learn. Is there anybody who has any time who could come over to my house, my apartment, before rehearsals? Give me an hour and a half a day or something? And there was just the slightest pause, and then Maura said, I could do that.
Rue and Maura worked on the play every morning and found that they enjoyed spending time together. They also found themselves attracted to each other, but Rue's startling discovery caused their relationship to be suddenly intimate.
I found a lump under my right arm, and I thought, I've got a stopped-up lymph node here.
She said, well, I guess I better have this looked at, and did I know a doctor? And I have a wonderful doctor. And I said, sure, and we set up an appointment. And I had a hunch, just a feeling that this was bad.
And I was examined and almost fell off the table when Dr. Fields said, I believe you have breast cancer. I got dizzy. My blood pressure dropped. I had to hold on to the table. I couldn't quite get my breath.
I thought, oh God, what else is going to happen to this woman? And we all know it's one of the scariest things in the world.
So they sent me to a surgeon, and the surgeon said, I recommend a double mastectomy as soon as possible. And I said, well, I think we'll go and get another opinion. Thank you.
It's like, what did she do to deserve this?
And so the fact that she had this dreadful, frightening thing happen to her was just a dreadful, frightening thing happening to us, and we had to deal with it.
And he said, I'm here with you if you want me, whatever it takes, through the long haul, as he put it. He said, even if you have to have a double mastectomy, I'm here if you'll have me. Well, I was in love with him.
Rue finally found a surgeon that offered her a more hopeful alternative.
He said, I believe we can do a lumpectomy. And if we get clean borders, that'll be that. We won't have to do a mastectomy.
The surgeon also recommended radiation and chemotherapy.
And she turned to me, and tears came streaming down her face, and she said, I'm going to lose my hair.
I think a woman's biggest fear is if she has breast cancer and has to have surgery, she's going to be less attractive to a man. And it was just the opposite.
It didn't take us long. We met in late May, and on June 6th, I told her I loved her. And on June 10th, I proposed. So yeah, it was quick.
I just popped up out of nowhere and said to him, I'd like to marry you. And he looked very surprised. And he said, will you marry me? Like, And I said, yes. And then he said, will you marry me? And I said, yes.
Marital record is bad on both sides. Let's see a counselor. What I didn't realize was she wanted us to see a counselor because she thought I was crazy.
I think when I married my other husbands, I knew the good parts about them. And I learned the bad parts, the difficult parts after marriage. I think in the case of Morrow, I knew the challenges involved.
And the wonderful thing about Morrow is how supportive he's been all the way through this. And I never get the impression that he married Rue McClanahan, the star. He married the lady.
Rue is the love of my life. She means everything to me.
Rue embraces life. She embraces risk. She embraces happiness.
I'm happy she
any
got to
kind
have
of
that
emotion.
kind of love.
She's there for it. She lets it
Now just
sweep
tears.
over her, become part of her.
I admit that a lot of times I look down on her innocence and on her naivete, you know. I think, oh, Rue, come on, you know. But then I think, what the hell? I mean, there's such joyousness there, you know.
I have had women everywhere from a nightclub to a church come up and tell me, you're her sister. Oh, I love her. Please tell her how much I love her.
I get this reaction all the time that people that have talked to my mom usually say, hey, she's great. Your mom is great. That's the reaction I get all the time. What a great mom you got. And I do. I'm lucky. I'm really, really lucky.
The piece of advice that I wish I had followed all my life, maybe I'm starting to now, which is, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. So, of course, the important thing is, to thine own self be true.
Oh gosh, I love her. Why did this make me cry? Oh, whenever I find out more about our girls, it always makes me emotional because one, they're not here anymore, and two, sorry, there's a little bit of noise. One, they're not here anymore with us, and then two, they're just so special, and it's great to not only see Rue as the actress that plays Blanche, which is this charismatic, amazing, self-confident woman, but to see the vulnerability behind the actress and that her life was full of ups and downs, but she was able to tackle it with such gusto and such passion because she was so sure of who she was meant to be as an actress, which I love. And I love how her parents cherished that dream within her and did not squash it because she's a woman, because of the times back then. No, they just, gave her the freedom to be able to dream and to reach out for those dreams. And lovely to just learn more about her and her marriages and I'm happy that at the end she was able to find the love of her life and have that successful marriage that she always saw for herself. And I feel like all those failed relationships taught her more about herself and taught her more about what she did not want and what she did not need in a partner to get her ready for that final man that she ended up being with. So I love this, and I loved learning more about our Rue, and I can't wait to see what the rest is going to be. I think I'm going to be doing Betty White next. So I can't wait to be able to tackle her as well. But I love Rue even more now that I did before watching this. And she is the consummate professional, an amazing actress through and through, and a beautiful, kind soul. So it sucks that I'm only getting to know these women after they passed away, minus Betty White, which I knew already. But I'm glad that I still get to, learn more about them and get a piece of them through their shows and through these type of documentaries. So I hope you guys enjoyed my reaction to this one. And if you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Mwah! Bye for now.